last video on this car, I talked about a few changes I wanted to make to it. And here we have those changes. We have the golden standard in racing springs, some Swift 6K springs. We've also got some high quality bump stops. I'll go ahead and talk about these a little later in the video. And to make sure we have our ride heights dialed and we have our bump stops dialed, we have some Swift helper springs as well to throw in there to make sure I can dial my ride height. I might not even need these, but we'll go ahead and get on that later in the video as well. I think first step is going to be pulling the rear coilovers out of this thing, and then we could actually deal with spring setup and bump stop height and all that sort of stuff. In your suspension system, in order to maximize grip, what you want to do is keep the tire in firm contact with the ground as much as possible. This means over any bumps, the tire will not bounce above the bumps, and under full compression, the car will not slam into the tires, bottom out the suspension, and turn the tire into a spring. Tires don't make great springs. They have extremely high spring rates. That is the point of a high quality bump stop, and today I'm going to show you guys how to not only adjust the bump stops but also get your ride height proper. A lot of people do not know how to adjust coilovers, and no matter who you talk to, everyone will argue and say that they're right, when really there's only one real way to do it, and it'll make a lot of sense once I explain it. Alright, so now we're going to do a quick tear down of this coilover. It is really easy to do, so don't stress out about it. A lot of people kind of do. I don't really know why. These things are super simple. That is pretty much it. Now, in order to set bump stop height, we're not going to touch these two collars. I'm going to take this off though. You want to have this collar loose, that way this can rotate wherever it needs to be. Pretty simple process. You're just going to assemble this coilover without a spring or anything else in it. So just put it all together the exact same way it came out, like so. My SD card ran out of memory, so I don't know how much of that you guys actually saw, but pretty much I just installed the coilover. No bump stop, no spring, no nothing, but just install it as it normally would go in. Now we're going to throw the wheel on, and we're actually going to start with the process. Now with the e-brake off and the car out of gear, you can see you could spin this wheel. This is what you want, so you're actually sure the tire isn't contacting anything. You want to put your jack under a control arm, go ahead and lift it up until something contacts or this tire stops moving. Okay, so right here you can see the tire is fully tucked up. This is as far as it'll go before really stopping the tire. So we want to have our bump stop set to where it'll stop the wheel just before it gets to this point. So what you're going to do now is you're actually going to rotate the shock body upwards until there's a gap of like a ½ inch between the shock body and the top hat. That way when we throw our bump stop in there, the bump stop will then fill in that gap when the car's under full compression and will prevent this from happening. In my case, my issue isn't really that the tire's hitting, because you could obviously see the Z can swallow up the whole entire tire, no issues. But the actual bottom of the car slams on the ground, and when this happens, it pretty much takes all the load off the tires, because you can imagine the car is being held up by the springs, but as soon as the car actually bottoms out on the ground, the springs aren't doing anything because this car sits on the ground. So what it does is it pretty much spikes spring rate, essentially, to infinity, and what it'll do is send the car loose, which is fun and looks cool, but it's not fast, and it could be really sketchy depending on where it happens. So I think what I'm gonna do is set my bump stop to interfere right about here, or maybe even right there. So just as the tire starts to tuck up in, I think I'll set the bump stop to start soaking up the bumps. Ideally, this would never happen. Driving normally, this will only happen under extreme bumps, like hitting curbing or slamming into a dip. This is the only time this spring would be this far compressed. So I don't think it'll be an issue. If the 6 case can hold the weight of the car up fine, it'll never get this low just from cornering and driving track like normal. So I'm gonna go ahead and adjust that shock and then start throwing all these things back together. Just quickly, you can see in here, nothing is contacting. These are pretty amazing. Like, this is kind of ridiculous. This is a 275/35. And it's tucking no problems. None of the arms are hitting, like nothing in here is an issue. Even the sway bar is still connected on this side. It is disconnecting from that side, as you can see. But the actual whole sway bar does not contact anything, and neither does any of the arms or the wheel. So pretty much, I know, as long as my tire isn't hitting the quarter here, it's not gonna do anything else inside the car. All right, so I've measured and I've got the wheel off. This is where the height is. You can see, it's, like I said, it's pretty remarkable in the way the Z works. Like, none of this stuff is contacting anywhere. It's pretty insane. I love the 350Z. This thing's amazing. Anyways, now you can see in here, this shock can be spun by hand while the lower and upper mounts stay the same. What you want to do is just close in a gap here, leave like a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch. You don't want the bumps up to engage too early, but you also don't want it engaging too late to where something has already hit and then cause an issue. If your tire hits the chassis, it'll pretty much lock that tire, which could send the car spinning or could do a bunch of crazy stuff. And if a metal arm contacts the chassis, it pretty much, like I said, turns that spring rate to infinity and then becomes an issue. What you're seeing there is a high quality shock. All right, so now as you've seen, we have set our bump stop height. This collar down here gets locked in. This is not a ride height collar, this is a bump stop collar. You do not touch this once your bump stop height is already set. This is gonna stay the same no matter what. These will change our ride height, and that is why we have helper springs. The job of a bump stop is to linearly stop the compression of the car before something contacts and then creates a significant hard out of nowhere stop. These are professional awesome bump stops. I have used these in the front of this car and in the Speed 6, and they're also amazing. These do have graphs that show they will linearly stop flow. Again, the whole point of your suspension system is to keep the tire in contact as well as it can without sudden increases or decreases in spring rate. That's what this will do. These are honestly a bit long. You can see the shock travel on these coilovers isn't too much. So if I were to throw this in, it would probably engage just at ride height. So what I'm actually going to do is cut it in half here to then pretty much make it the same height as the stock bump stops that came with these coilovers. And then we could actually throw these in, have a higher quality bump stop, and still get our complete travel without having the car come into contact with the bump stops too soon. Alright, so as you can see, we did get this one cut down. Much harder to cut through than I thought it would be, to be honest. Now, what I'm going to do, before throwing the springs fully on, I want to make sure my bump stops are set correctly. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw our bump stop on, throw on our dust boot, like so. That way we know that is set correctly, and we're going to go ahead and throw it back together again and toss it back in the car. Compress it up with the wheel on, make sure the car will stop when the bump stop engages, and be a proper droop and a proper compression height. Alright, not sure if you guys just noticed what happened. I jacked up the car as far as the wheel would go before it actually started lifting the chassis, and you can see the tire still moves. So what you're looking at right now is a properly set bump stop. You know, once this fully hits its full compression, as far as the shock will let it go, it's still able to move just fine. So nothing in here will be binding. This is exactly what you want to see. Now we can assemble this coilover for the final time, taking some measurements as well to make sure that the other coilover will match. We're also going to check the other coilover once it's all together, but just to check and make sure of everything, I'm going to go and take measurements of this. That way the other side will be a lot easier. We just throw it in, set up the measurements. As long as nothing touches, we're good to go. So we're looking at right about 5 3/8 for our overall height from the shock perch here to the top of the shock here. So, good and quick explanation of helper springs. The whole point of these will be to set your droop and your ride height after the shock. Since you're not adjusting ride height from this lower mount here, and you're actually adjusting it from the springs, if your springs don't compress enough and your car's left too tall, you're not going to really be able to do anything unless you add a helper, because a helper will keep the spring pre-tensioned, but it will not affect your overall spring rate. You can see these compress really easily, and they even make different spring rates for these. When the car's under compression or when it's on the ground, these will be fully compressed anyways, so it's not going to have anything to do with your actual overall spring rate, but it will pretty much add in space. That way, whenever the car's in the air, the spring is not bouncing around, but it'll also allow this to compress before the spring, which also allows the shock to compress before the actual spring starts engaging. One thing a lot of people miss out is these little shims. These are to prevent binding on the spring, so you do want to use these. A lot of coilovers don't come with these for some reason. Feels do, and these helper springs came with a bunch. So we're going to definitely be using these between every spring mounting just to be sure these will work correctly. Another quick explanation, because a lot of people aren't sure on this, is going to be coilover spring diameters and sizing. Obviously, the main easy one to check is going to be our length. These are usually measured in inches. Spring rate is either measured in kilograms per millimeter or pounds per inch. There are tons of conversions out there. Typically, you'll hear K, that is kilograms per millimeter, which is what these are measured by. All Swift springs are measured by that. Companies like, I believe, Hyperco, iBox, stuff like that are measured in pounds per inch, so just do the conversions. Another big thing is inner diameter. People don't know this. Swifts are pretty awesome. The color of the spring tells you what the diameter is. The light blue springs are going to be a 60 mil inner diameter, which works with like a lot of European coilovers and Fortunatas and stuff like that. These rose gold looking ones are 65 inner diameter. These will work on obviously your Fields, your Megans, your BCs, all that sort of stuff. BCs actually have a 62 millimeter. You could use these on those, but these 62 millimeter ones are more of a gold, a straight gold. And then you have green springs as well, which are a 70 millimeter, which I believe will work on a lot of Tang coilovers. So just be sure you know what size you're getting, because if these are too big for your spring perches, they could damage these perches here where the spring rides, because it'll pretty much push over it, or it just won't fit over at all if you get a spring too small. So quick lesson on Swift springs. Alright, so this seems to be the case with this car. Usually when I'll set bump stops, I don't need helper springs. As you see here, this is the car at ride height. There's nothing under it at all. Go ahead and get under it. You can kind of see it's very low, so it's going to be hard to see. But this is no rubbing. Bump stops are set, and it's probably just sitting on bump stops now. It's actually not even using the springs at all. If any, very little. So I will try and adjust the coilover by the spring perches and try and get the height right. If I get the height right and the spring perch or the helper spring is fully compressed already, I'm just going to pull them out, because why have the extra weight and complication if this is going to be useless pretty much. And it looks sweet, but still definitely too low. So we're gonna have to raise it up more, which probably means getting rid of those helpers. Like I said, this is rare. Usually when you just bump stops, you will need the helpers to bring them back down, but since the Z can move the wheel so high up, you're already lowering the shock so much by bringing the bump stop down so far, you don't really need helper springs in the rear especially. Alright, so when I ordered these 6K springs, I ordered them 6 inches. What normally comes on these coilovers is 7 inches, but I did get lucky. You can see there's plenty of shock above this, so if I delete the helper spring, I'll still have enough area to compress the spring to either get height or just to preload it. and it not be an issue. So I'm actually gonna pull this over or out of the car again, and then throw in the coilover setup without a helper spring, since you see it's not needed with how low the car is gonna actually be. All right, so with no helper spring and essentially no preload on this spring, it's still just a bit too low. I think I'm gonna raise it up another 1/4 inch and probably be good. Very simple to raise height on these. These are a linear spring, so preloading it will not add any spring rate to it. I'm pretty much gonna raise this a 1/4 inch, which will add a 1/4 inch of preload to the spring, which is weight off the car fighting it down. So it'll essentially raise the car, but it won't change the effective rate of the spring, because no matter where this is, it'll still take 6 kilograms per millimeter to compress it more. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and raise this up and then check it again. It should be good though. Here's our current height. I think I'm gonna bring it up another 1/4 inch and then be happy with it. You have to also think about how this is just settled down. It's not gonna settle yet. And the reason it's not settled is not because the bushings or the coilovers need to break in. It's because the car will gain camber, and it trying to gain camber is fighting the wheels from going down farther. So as soon as this rolls, it'll actually drop height a little bit more. So I think, like I said, I'm gonna raise it a 1/4 inch and then we should be good. There's about 1.5 inches of droop, or 2 inches of droop, and it should be about 2 inches of bump in the quarter as well. You can imagine this tire going up to here, about 2 inches travel for this to reach here. So we should have an effective, like, sort of 2 inch up, 2 inch down bump and droop, which is good. And we'll just have to drive it and see how it feels, maybe make some changes, but at least now we know where things are at, and we know the spring rate should match a lot better. 6K rear, 13K front. Stiffer sway bar on the rear, stiffer sway bar on the front also. Here we are. I haven't been to this road in forever. This road's actually super nice. I kind of take for granted how good it is because I just don't come out here often. Pull over here. There is a crazy view of this mountain and just all the mountains in general. I mean, look at this. Pretty insane to come out here and see all this. As I was saying before a group of motorcyclists went by, I am extremely satisfied with this. I was a little weary last time because driving the car with the stiffer sway bar, I was driving on tighter roads to be fair, but it just didn't feel as planted as I really wanted it to be. This with the 6Ks and the stiffer sway bar still, it feels so good. Actually, the shocks are all very soft right now. They're pretty much adjusted all the way down to 0 clicks of rebound and compression, but they still feel pretty good. I really just wanted to loosen the shocks all the way to really get a feel for how the springs are working, because even when you go to a new track, it's good practice to set the dampers to completely soft. That way you can really see what the car's doing before you actually make any adjustments. So the rear's at like 6 clicks, the front's at 8, just because I didn't want it to be too wallowy, but I still wanted it to be pretty solid, and honestly, it feels amazing. It's still a little low in the rear. You can see I did adjust the height a little lower. This is turned with casters, so it's going to look lower. If you come to the other side, it's not quite that low, but it still is pretty low, and it does scrape the rear end a little bit on some bumps, but I think it's just the exhaust. I'm not sure if I'm going to raise it at all yet. The bump stops are set well, like the tires aren't, I don't feel the car bottoming out, it's just the exhaust scraping, that's all I hear. I think I'm going to chill up here for a little bit more, and then I'm just going to get back in the car, go back down this road. This road, like I said, it's great. I didn't really talk about the road that much. This road is much more wide. It just kind of represents the tracks I drive a lot more than a tight road like I was on before. There are some tight sections here, obviously, but it's still pretty wide open, and you could see I was using 3rd and 4th gear a lot, so that's how you know it's a much better road than the other one to test out. I might even go to the other road today just to see, you know, might as well check it out. If the car feels good on here, I'm sure it'll feel great on the lower speed sections, but we'll just have to see. Yeah, I'm gonna chill out here a little bit more, take it in the view, haven't been here in a while, just enjoy it, and then end up driving back down and see how this thing feels a little bit more.